All right, I'm live. Woohoo! Give me a sec. As always, where is my camera? Here. I've got to share this on a couple of pages where I said that I would be sharing this. So just put this on mute. Give me a second. And one more. If you're on, give me a love heart so that I know that you can hear me. That would be amazing. Hi Kim, how are you? Okay, I think I am all good to go. I better mute all my notifications. Ah! Okay, love hearts, woohoo, I'm good to go. All right, so I said that I would share with you, well, I've got a few different stories that I could share, but this main one had a huge impact on my life. Now to set the air of how potent and powerful this journey was for me specifically, I need to share a bit of a backstory for context. Yeah. So when I was 19, I had a pretty intense heartbreak, a breakup. I've blogged about that before. The blog's called Love Is. If you go to my personal website, donnaraymond.com.au, you can type it in there. And it was about the medicine of heartbreak. And it was journeying through what love meant and the freedom and the expansion that comes from true unconditional love. So I was meant to be moving from Melbourne back to Queensland with this particular guy, and it all just kind of fell by the wayside, and being super heartbroken. At the time, I kept getting these really intense dreams of these Amazonian temples, pyramids, and this little boy and this mama, and there was like all this like deep, intense kind of ancestral like grief and stuff come through. It was like really full on, and these dreams just kept coming and coming and coming, and I was like, the theme of it was chasing this little boy, and I couldn't find him, and it was really quite intense. So I didn't really know anything about Peru per se. I just had a calling in my heart to go, and that was kind of validated from this reoccurring dreaming that would come through in my actual dreaming, my lucid dreaming state, and then my waking state as well. And so anyway, I'd organized it. I'd asked my dad if I could borrow some money, and I'd planned a trip to go to Peru. One of the intentions that I had set was to journey into Iquitos, into the Amazon, and I was going to find somebody, a shaman or someone to work with the master plants, so with the Ayahuasca. And that was one of my big intentions, and I wanted to experience my 20th birthday in the jungle. So here I am, 19. I have booked a trip overseas, and I'm going on my own with like no money. I've shared a story about this before, where my mum slipped me a couple of grand underneath my pillow the night before, because I was just like going, I was like just totally going to wing it and figure out something, because the pay from the cruise ship that I used to work on just hadn't come through. So anyway, I decided to do it the safest way possible for me, knowing that, I was a young woman. I'd never been overseas before. I didn't speak the language. And so I booked in a tour. And at the time, the company, I don't think it operates anymore. It was called Kamuka. And I did a 21-day expedition throughout Peru we started in Santiago in Chile, and then went to Bolivia. So started in La Paz actually, and then ended up in Lima in Peru, and it meandered all through, did the Inca Trail, the whole lot. Like, it was super amazing experience. Then on the tail end, I figured if I spent 21 days immersing myself in the culture and the language, I would get a feel for it. I would get a feel for the language enough to pick it up, because like anything, if you saturate yourself in it, it's easier, it's quicker to pick things up and to become more fluent in it. So I had planned then a week after that journey to go my own way, and I felt confident towards the end. And part of that journey, as I mentioned, I was going to spend my 20th birthday drinking medicine. That was the plan. I could feel the deity, the devas of the plants speaking to me, and that was a journey. And I guess part of it was like my intention that that's what I wanted to create for myself. That never came to pass. So 2 days before the end of the trip, we went to Huacachina in Ica in Peru, and it's like a beautiful little oasis town like filled with these incredibly massive sand dunes. Now, I was a skater chick, right? So I was like super confident, and we were sandboarding that day, and a little bit of ego crept in, and I like bombed this massive sand dune. Now the thing about the sand dunes is, because there's no horizon line, it distorts your sense of perspective of how big and deep it is and how fast you're going, because you've kind of got nothing to relate it to. So I bombed this mad hill and tumbled and had an accident, and I flipped like a rag doll, and I heard everybody around me just scream, and the first thing I remember was just like, oh, just sand in my face going everywhere. And yeah, it was really intense. And I got towards the end, and I remember just like coming up, and I was like covered in sand, like stuffed with sand. And I was like, did anyone get that on camera? Because that would have been fucking awesome. Even though everyone was like screaming, thought I was going to die, I had survived. Like it was pretty intense, and just kind of realizing that, oh my God, I'm in an accident. And the only thing that, in my opinion and perspective, and even speaking to other people, the only thing that saved me from it being really, really bad was the fact that my feet came out of my shoes, which was still strapped to the really dodgy pieces of ply that they call their sandboards over there, because otherwise the board would have gone straight to my head. That's how I'd flipped. So yeah, it was a pretty wild experience. So lo and behold, I didn't actually get to go into the Amazon. I actually ended up flying home, and I spent my 20th birthday in a neck brace with a compressed spinal cord and fluid on the back of my neck in Townsville, November, sweating my ass off, just like going, what the hell? Like, happy birthday to me. So it was a really intense journey. And I think part of me began to understand that it just wasn't my time. It wasn't meant to be. And it's one of those things that I just want to share as I set the scene for the story, is that if you've been feeling a stirring with inside, working with the master plants is not something that you fully penetrate that space. It's not like you manipulate it to make it happen for you. When you step into the sacred, you feel the plant spirits talk to you, and everything will align the way that it should for you and your journey. And you will journey with them when you're called to, and when it's like the teacher reveals itself when the student is really ready. Yeah, not when you think you're ready and trying to create that. So I held that, and I was like, okay, it wasn't my time. So lo and behold, I had back issues from that. I'd also had 3 near-death experiences in the span of a year. So I'd had a car accident, I nearly drowned in the river near where I was born, like some really intense experiences, and that was one of them. And it all kind of compounded to a lot of physical injuries in the span of 1 year. Like it was a big initiation for me, actually, because that was just on the cusp of my radical spiritual awakening, which was my 18th to 19th year as I transitioned. And then that next year was it blew my mind. It was pretty wild. So needless to say, I came back from that trip a changed person, a changed woman. I became more humble, more connected to the spiritual dimensions. But that's what happens when you're, you know, a privileged white person and you go and travel and you experience other cultures and you see firsthand the effects of poverty and political struggle, the things that, you know, when you're isolated in a really comfy place like Australia, you don't get to see. And so that really shaped my perspective as a young woman, and it humbled me, and it allowed me to cultivate a deep connection to people and to empathy as well. So anyway, lo and behold, that never left me, working with the master plants, working with the Great Mother and the vine. It was always there, but it was nothing that I actively sought out. So that was 2005, I think it was. So then it was 2009. It was 2000. So I had Aurora in 2007. So became a mother, went on that journey, and then there was a weekend that I went away to Rainbow Serpent Festival and had some time off on my own, which, you know, if you're an exclusively breastfeeding mama and, you know, conscious and plugged in, and you give your all to your children, when you finally get that time back to yourself, it's huge. And so I went to this festival there with a really close sister of mine, and we had the opportunity to try some DMT, and these people were brewing, I'm pretty sure they were brewing some ayahuasca, and I was just like, what the hell, like a festival experience, like, nah mate, like that's not cool. Like part of me always really respected the traditional origins, particularly with plant medicine or transformational healing on that journey. And it's really important that you have an experienced guide and a safe setting to be able to explore on these dimensional realms. So it was like, oh, isn't this really interesting? Like, I'm not seeking, but then, you know, had it right there, and it was almost like this carrot dangled in front of my face. I'm like, oh, I want to try it, but I don't want it that much. Like, that's just felt really yucky. So needless to say, I, you know, went the respectful route and I didn't go down that journey. But it was a few years later, it was 2011, 2012, I started to have these dreams. Now, if you had a look at the post below, you would have seen that artwork from Adam, Maya's dad. Now, that was his interpretation of this really profound lucid dream that I had. And part of this dream, I met with a shaman, a man, and he was probably in his 40s or so. I didn't really have the visual understanding or archetypal qualities of what happens in medicine circle, but it came through in my dream. And a big thing that I remember was the sound of, and he was moving around me with some leaves and this smoke, and I remember like looking into the fire, and then this big serpent comes at me, and there's this moment where you journey and you meet your fear. And it's like you confront death and fear and, you know, whatever the serpent represents to you of your transformation and what you're meant to move through. And so I'm confronting this serpent that's just like looking at me like this. And it was like, okay, I see you and I'm in this dream. And it was like this moment where it was like, okay, I surrender. I see you. I'm completely present with you. You're either going to devour me and I surrender to that journey, or I'm just going to sit here in this stillness and the peace of it. And I remember that there was like this hyper communication going on, like an intuitive telepathic sense that to my right, there was like this bucket of stardust. Well, it looked like this cosmic group of stardust and universes and galaxies. Like if you went, boop, it'd like ripple through dimensional planes, right? And I remember I had to like put my hand in that while I'm just holding the gaze of this serpent, and I literally had to paint this cosmic serpent with it and lubricate it because it was in this state of friction. The serpent was calling me to help it. And so I'm like having this full-on journey with this snake, like applying this cosmic lube to it so that it could like start slithering and moving. And And that's when something happened. I think maybe the snake devoured me, because this is a long time ago. That was the most significant moment that I remember of the dream. And then there was a little bit after that where the shaman guy started to do his stuff around me, and I could feel all these kind of ancestral dimensions open up. And that's when the sound, the breath, and the all around me. And it was like, yeah, really incredible. And it was an initiation dream for me, and I passed it. And I was like, I came out of the dream and it was so amazing and so lucid and so profound. I was like, fuck, like that just blew my mind and really incredible. And I remember describing that to Adam, and that's what fueled that painting. So that is a painting of me with, and you can see the serpent rising through, and it was just that whole energetic portrait of how he interpreted my dream, or perhaps how he interpreted it on a visual language as I was speaking it, you know, after I'd had it. So pretty profound experience. But what happened after that is I went to a local fruit and veggie shop, and then I met this connection with the woman who then introduced me to these other people, and lo and behold, the consciousness, or what I was tuning into, it was almost like it was time now, and the opportunity arose for me to journey with the medicine. And it felt clear, it felt clean, pure, grounded, like it was just a natural step. So I went to this journey and sat in circle. And it wasn't a jungle brew. So the jungle brew traditionally is with Psychotria viridis, which is the vine, and then Banastropus carpi, which is the MAOI. So I'm not going to go into the details of how the medicine works, but the MAO is the monoamine oxidase inhibitors, and you've got these enzyme in your gut, which is, our body doesn't naturally process the DMT orally, which is why you need something else to mix it with. So this particular brew was an acacia brew, which are native trees to Australia, and it was mixed with Syrian rue, which is a native, or it was a wild grass. And it had a little bit of vine in it as well. So it was a really beautiful experience for me. I was bleeding at the time. I didn't know, right, that traditionally speaking, well, there's two ways of thoughts, and more like when I researched it after, is like, if you're in South America, a lot of the times they don't encourage the women who are bleeding to sit in circle, because they're so intuitive, like you're at your most intuitive and powerful when you're on your menstrual cycle, that it can like take the visions from other people in the circle. So I didn't know this. And there's other ways to ground the womb space, because you really want to protect that creative energy, and that's with a malpacho patch, which is the sacred tobacco. Tobacco is a really grounding plant, of course, natural, not with any of the synthetic chemicals used to extract. So I didn't have any of that. So I went into this experience. I did my proper dieta, which is a sacred diet, for 2 weeks beforehand. And it was a very strict diet for me, even though I knew other people that weren't doing it to the same effect. And the reason why I really wanted to respect the dieta, I mean, traditionally you can go 30 days to even a couple of months before, but for the process of what I was working through, that was where I was at the time, is I really wanted to not only have a clear and clean vessel, but honor the spirit of the plant. And it was like, well, if I'm going to journey with you, I'm going to be here with you and completely present. And to do that, you've got to be committed to, you know, cleansing the body temple, so that the great mother, the medicine, can scan your body in a clear way. And ultimately I wanted to move out any gunk that could be blocking me from doing this journey. So anyway, the intention, here's where it comes full circle, why it's got context to it. The intention was to heal this pain in my back, these injuries that I had sustained. The biggest one was from a sandboarding accident in Peru, when I actually went to go, like the purpose and the intention was to go and drink medicine and have my 20th birthday in the jungle, and that didn't happen. And then here I am, however many years, I think it was like 6 years later or whatever, with the opportunity, and I'm in circle, and that was my intention. So I go on this journey, and I remember, drinking the medicine and doing the whole ritual and being clear and holding that space. And the first night that I ever tried it, I went gentle. And the reason why I did that is because with anything that I do with respects to medicine or transformational healing or like moving beyond the waking state, so if it's any type of entheogens or anything like that, I mean, I don't really do them these days, but back then I was a bit of a psychonaut and really wanted to expand my perspective of the world. The reason why I would always go gently first was to develop the language and map the space. And this is a lot of stuff that I teach with the work that I do, is about mapping those inner landscapes before you go deeper. And the reason being is because that gives you a grounding point to come back to center, and it gives you a sense of familiarity. And once you're familiar with things, you can test the comfort zone, you can test the boundaries and push yourself to the edge. And when it comes to do with anything to do with the psyche and the mind, I have really strong boundaries in how far I will actually push myself to what is conducive to growth to what actually could be detrimental and create trauma. Like there's a really fine line in that. So it was the second night that I drank that, after I had understood the language, what to expect, how my body responded to the medicine, how she moved through me, then I went deeper on the second night. And the second night, my full intention was to like fine-tune, focus where this pain was in my body. So when I went in there and, when it started to move through and started to come on, and I'm kind of leaving this space and entering into the different multidimensional realms, I remember asking her, of course, surrendering, like, show me where I need to go. What am I being called of to work here? But also, this is where I consciously want to go to heal. When I went into the pain in my back, I remember when I got into that space and it was just this sea of blackness. This is the interesting thing because it's at nighttime. So it's like dark anyway. I've got my eyes closed, but like, when you're in those beautiful crystalline kaleidoscopic interdimensional realms and there's beings and all sorts of stuff that you're communicating with and setting boundaries with and stuff, to enter into a void of nothingness, and it was like a pit of black, like almost putrefied, but not, like it didn't have any sense of smell or anything like that. It was just this heavy black energy, and that was this pain that was located in my back, physical pain around my sacrum area that I'd been holding on to for a long time. Like I'd been journeying through this, and one thing that most people that are close to me know is that I've got a high pain tolerance and a high emotional pain tolerance too. So I can be experiencing a lot of pain, and unless it's at a point where I'm not coping and it needs to be expressed, I'll just go about my day and do whatever I need to do to get by, because there's no point in focusing and amplifying on it. It's like, well, I know it's there, I'm aware of it, I do what I can to work through it, but life happens as well. I'm not going to allow it to keep me from doing what I want to do and how I want to show up and create in the world. So as I'm sitting with this pain, I remember going deep into it and feeling how full on it was, and feeling the trauma of how significant it was when these particular accidents happened, and that in all of those senses I was alone in it. Like, we're always alone in it, right? But it was like just that sense of isolation, and how much of a shock it was to my body, because the near-death experiences that I'd had, which followed on from that, were a bit of a shock to the system. Like I wasn't expecting them at all. And so everything was black and it started to consume me, and that's when I kind of felt the purge come. And it's like I could feel the medicine kind of working all through my system, and she was scanning deep, and it was like this hand kind of going in and extracting every last little tendril of wherever that pain was anchored in my body. Because the reality is the physical manifestation was in my sacrum, but the energetic imprint and the trauma and the emotional imprints came from other parts of my body. And it was like a deep soul excavation. It was an extraction, like, and I could feel the mother like working with me, and we were like heaving it up together, like till you get the last festy plug of it. And as that came up, that's when the purge comes. So I'm sitting I'm sitting with my bucket, and I'm just chucking up, like throwing my guts up, and it's heaving, and it's like, you know, like if you've had gastro or something, but it's like towards the end of it when there's just bile, but there's not really anything to come up, but it's like this deep, dry retch, like you're trying to get every like last bit, like squeeze every last bit of illness out. And that's what this experience was like. But I felt like I purged. I felt like I filled the bucket up. The reality is I didn't, because I'd been fasting, but it was like just that, the weight of what I was letting go of in my purge. And it was beautiful to actually feel that, and to go through the motion of being physically ill and vomiting and having that purge, and the energetic purge, and the sweat coming through, knowing that it was of purpose. It's much like the intense sensations you get with birth. You know, there's a positive outcome. And so you go through the intensity, and you're so present with it because it's beneficial. There's nothing to resist, because this is part of rebirthing yourself, yeah? So that kind of finished up, and then I gently had the space, like once it came to completion, I could then start to integrate back into my body, and I was just flooded with so much beauty and grace in this incredible angelic realm. And then it was like, it got to the point where I, you know, started to really anchor back into the physical space, and I could just smell this waft of spew. And I'm like, okay, I've got to go get rid of that now, because that's not cool. And it's like, I need to physically get up and move outside of the circle space, still being energetically present, but just going outside. And the thing is with the purge is, you know, there was the opportunity to choose how you released that back, and you know, you could put it down the toilet, drain, but I was really called to return it to the Great Mother. And one of the messages that she spoke to me was that with that pain is that she has the ability to alchemize it, yeah? And so we can gift that pain back, being really present, and offer our prayers and our gratitude and our song, and you know, tend to the earth with love, to honor the sacrifice that she gives to us, and the way that she can support us, sustain us, nurture us, and to also alchemize and to take that pain away and to create beauty and life out of it. So that was really, really beautiful. So here's a significant moment, right? So I've released, I physically let go, but then it came to the point where I actually had to release the vomit out of the bucket. And this is what was like, it hit me for a six, because I didn't want to. I found myself in this state of defense, because everything that was inside of that bucket represented a part of my identity for the last 6 years, of something that I had shaped myself around this pain, this story, this, you know, enacting it, and that became a part of me, even though it wasn't me authentically. I had claimed it. It was my story. I had invested in it, yeah? And it was like, oh, you can't get rid of this, because this is a part of yourself. And I remember feeling into my back, and it was just like breath inside. It was just so expansive. And my mind is like, you couldn't have possibly healed yourself like that. No way. You know, this is all bullshit. And my neocortex, the chattering, the monkey mind's coming back in to tell me all the ways that this wasn't real and there's no way that this worked. But yet my heart and my body was like, yeah, this is where you are now, and this is your choice. Like, you can choose to feel what it's like to live pain-free and with ease, and to offer it, or you know, you can choose the story. And it was a battle. I tell you, it was a full-on battle for 5-10 minutes of holding on to this bucket, looking at it like, no, I just don't think I can let go of it. And feeling the weight of it, that's one thing that I remember, is the visceral experience. Even though there wasn't actually that much in the bucket, it felt so heavy. The stories that were contained in that purge and everything else that they were connected to, it had a weight, and it had affected me in ways that were not conducive to my highest potential or my soul, to, you know, my future self, and to the Great Mother, so to Gaia and the plant spirits, the Madre. And I was like, whoa, like just really feeling the profundity of that moment of like, wow, I've got a choice here, and everything that I want is on the other side of it, but yet I just still couldn't find that point. All right, I just switched over to my mobile data because that dropped out. So I think I'm all good now. Jay's watching Netflix documentary on the other side, so it might be everyone's starting to jump online now. So yeah, I remember just having this moment of like, wow, everything that I want is on the other side. I've got to make this choice, but the choice to move towards it just felt so huge, and I didn't feel small, like in a negative way, but I just like felt like I was gripping this great big bucket. Like, do you remember the troll dolls of like the early 90s with like the crazy hair, and they like gripped onto the end of your pencil? I think that's what it felt like, that I was just grabbing onto this bucket because it was mine and I didn't want to let it go. It was like, it was having that choice to do it. And there came this pivotal moment where I actually had to sit with myself, to listen, to claim what I wanted, and I actually had to give myself permission to let go. That it was okay to let this pain go. It was okay to let this story go. It was okay for me to let this version of myself, which I had identified with and created for so long, it was okay to leave that behind. And that the Mother would take that medicine and create beauty and life and alchemize it into goodness. And that I didn't need to hold the weight of that anymore, and it didn't need to hold me back. And I just remember like crying and just weeping because it was such a big moment for me. And perhaps you can relate to this with journeys that you might have gone through, where you've had to make big decisions of what story do you invest in? What version of yourself are you going to keep creating and animating with the things that you tell yourself and what's possible? So I then remember coming into this space of grace, really pure, pristine grace. I was like weeping, and I felt like I was crying tears of beauty, like, I got it. Like, I get it now. This makes so much sense to me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I remember taking a deep breath and like connecting with that young girl that was heartbroken, that escaped pretty much to Peru to try and find herself and to try and make sense of the world, and that wanted to push herself to the outer limits and really wanted to go on journey with the medicine. This is before ayahuasca tourism was a thing. This is before, you know, the boom of the medicine circles. And like no one that I knew even knew what it was back then. It was like, yeah, it was a very interesting time. You know, at that time when I was 19, and then to come full circle, to have that opportunity, but to journey with the plants native to this land was really special. To tune into the intelligence encoded from Australia with the land that I was born on was actually really special, like really profoundly special for me. And so I remember stepping into that state of grace and complete presence, and I remember feeling my heart swell and blossom, and I gently released it. The funny part, it was a cool part. Any type of transformational healing, you'll go like through this epic catharsis and then like beauty, and then there's always this moment I find, and I don't know if it's just me because I'm a bit of a weirdo, but like things happen that I just think are hilarious. Like, really? really? Or, you know, like, really? It was like, I made myself go through that and this is the outcome. And like, you integrate it, you're like, huh. And you literally end up to that space where you tilt your head back to the sky and you just laugh because it's so freaking funny when we get out of our own way and we listen and we just be. So I'm offering my vomit back to the earth. And it's just like, because it's all bile and just like thick, this thick mucousy bile, it's gone back. And I was expecting like this, you know, like a watery sound, but it wasn't. It was like a splat. And I was like, oh, that's really funny. And then I covered it with some grass and some flowers, and I offered my prayers and I sang a song to the land and just really sat with that. And then I remember the dawn was coming and I sat outside and I received such precious treasures that morning. And I'd removed myself from the group because I was still in this really beautiful space of integration. It's like in any type of transformational healing, there's this moment where you push yourself to your edge and then your body will tell you. Like if you listen to the intelligence and your body wisdom, it'll be like, no, that's enough. And you'll naturally start to contract and come into that integration space and you'll begin your cocooning. And so that was happening. And so I was sitting outside and the dawn's coming and it was really foggy and it's just beautiful. So there's dew all over the grass. And then the sun came up over the hill and I'll never forget it because it just hit all the little dewdrops on each blade of grass and flower that was in the garden. And I was just like completely blown away. And I've always had respect for that. And I can see the beauty in nature and just being that present on the microcosm, like just how incredible nature is. But because of the space that I was in and what I had just been through, I was like, oh, this is so beautiful. Like these are the precious jewels. This is of the highest value. And this is what we've got to protect as well. Yeah, it's like really looking at that, like, wow, it's way more precious than, you know, like a ring or something material is this beautiful dewdrop on a blade of grass and just watching it glisten in the sunlight. And then, I don't know if you do this, but I've been doing this since I was a little person, is I'll sit in, you know, in nature and I'll just pause my eyes and I unfocus and then watch everything come alive, and I'll see the ants scurrying about, and then, you know, things that you didn't really see when you were absorbed with yourself, all of a sudden you enter into a different realm and a different dimension. So I was kind of going through this push-pull state of entering into that world of the plant realm, and, you know, yeah, it was just such a really, really beautiful experience. So the reason why I wanted to share that with you is because I get asked a lot, particularly in the nature of the work that I help facilitate and the mentoring that I do and the group programs and training and workshops and, you know, all the things, is there comes this point, it's like, you know, a lot of transformational facilitators will be like, well, how do you let go? How do you do it? And I think sometimes we get so trapped up on the how, where it's not up to us to know. It's just coming into that space of purity and knowing that we have the choice to, and that I know that this sounds like really cliche, right? But it's knowing that we do have that choice and that we can look at where you are at the moment at any given stage, and you can always see it as a crossroad. Every single day when you come into presence, there is always, you can make this choice or this choice, and there's multiple different ways that you can go, and that's the art of presence and wisdom, is choosing the path that is going to best serve you. And it's like, well, do you want to keep reanimating these stories which have created pain and restriction and not allowing you to experience joy and to flourish? Or do you want to perhaps be a little bit curious on what would happen if you chose this realm? And it's like, do you remember those Choose Your Adventure books? It's like that, like there's stories within stories within stories, and these like fractals, and we, each choice that we make steers us into a direction that we ultimately choose when we take responsibility for being a conscious creator of our reality. So in that, I left that medicine circle like blown wide open, like, wow, it was such a gift. I'm glad that it happened that way, like, because what I learned and integrated from that. And then, holy shit, I was driving now, and there's like this like rural setting. So we're going down this rural road, and there's like forest on one side and like a cow paddock on the other. And there was this tree with this branch that like went over the road. And no shit, there were 2 massive eagles there. And I was just like, what the hell? Wedge-tail eagles. And I'm just like, my jaw dropped. And I spoke to Adam. He was beside me. I'm like, am I actually, like, is that real? Is that real, or have I just seen that? And I've just like stopped, and he's just like, I pulled over the car, and I'm just like, wow, that is incredible. And he's like, what? I'm like, do you see that? And then I think he finally got it, and then he was just like, whoa, but by that stage, they began to fly away with this massive wingspan, and I was just like, whoa, like such an amazing synchromistical omen and validation for me. That was a gift for me, and I was just like, wow, so amazing. So I've had other stories as well, and perhaps I'll do another live stream about the time that I went into Medicine Circle 10 days after my dad passed away, and a big reason why I felt called to do that was to help him cross over, because he died quite suddenly, and that, would be the most intense, confronting, challenging experience I have had to consciously navigate, like what I knew I had to do and what I was called to do. And I really had to confront some big fears and insecurities, and, could I do it? Which was all came to completion within that circle. Like, that was intense. It's not something that I recommend for everybody. And, most people that have journeyed with me know that I'm a bit gung-ho with my shadow work and can go to those deep spaces because I naturally walk between worlds, and it's not something that is foreign to me, but it still scared the shit out of me, actually committing to it and showing up to fulfill that role and responsibility that I felt that I had, being who I was. So that was another pretty intense journey for me, and perhaps one that not only rocked me, but also validated personal philosophies that I had created over the years. And that's, from when I first began like really questioning reality and why we're here, was around 12 years old. It was before that, but that's when I really consciously remember going deep into it, and that sparked an intense anxiety period for me for about 5-6 years, where everything would cave in and get dark, and I would have like full-on anxiety, panic attacks, and stop breathing, and it was a really, really intense time for my life. But that all kind of was another journey that came to completion in Medicine Circle as well. So the reason why I share this is not to be like, hey, you should go and do ayahuasca and work with the plants. One is to be discerning, to trust your inner wisdom. If you feel called to work with the master plants, they will reveal themselves to you. You set the intention, and it's like, it will happen, rather than conjuring or manipulating particular circumstances. And I think that's just really being respectful and entering into the realms of the sacred, where you know that it is actually in alignment for your journey. Because a lot of the time we think we want something, and we could do whatever we want to create it, but is it really conducive for our growth? And is it really where we need to invest our energy into? And it's also, if that is your journey and you are feeling called, to make sure that you have safe guides. So the shamans that you're working with, or the curandeer, I can't even pronounce that word. Just making sure you're really, really safe, and the setting in that psychologically safe is a huge thing, because with the boom of, kind of medicine tourism in that respect, you can, research it online. There has been some not very intentional circles that are, just the intention of it is everything. So just being really respectful to the plants that you're working with, doing it properly. But my main message in sharing this is about giving yourself permission to let go. And that is the key to your freedom, is when you allow yourself to unhook from it. Because sometimes we might consciously understand that we want to do it, and we're like, yeah, okay, I want to let go of this, but it's just not happening. Is giving yourself permission to let go will naturally align you to the energetic frequency of forgiveness. Yeah, it's kind of like this beautiful sacred relationship that takes place, because then you look at forgiveness about looking at, how you've created certain situations in your life and how you've behaved or enabled or enacted certain things, whoever it may be, have contributed to whatever the story is, and offering that forgiveness, because the forgiveness is the key to unhooking. It's not about saying that, well, it didn't happen, the trauma didn't exist, and, it didn't affect your life. It's just about going, well, I now choose this way. And it's like, oh, I'm either closing that book or turning the page, and this is where I'm going now, and I forgive myself for creating it, forgive anybody else that played into whatever it is, and focusing on where you're going, rather than being like having a leash around your neck to something in the past which is not valid anymore. Yeah, and I think that's a really powerful thing to be able to share with people, to say that it is possible to be able to come to that place of peace and acceptance for whatever your journey is. Now, I know for mine it was like a physical thing, but this, branches out to, lots of trauma-based stuff as well. And you also don't need to reanimate the story, because the more you keep going into the story, the more that it feeds it and gives it more life. Yeah, and that's like coming into the medicine perspective as well, like working with the multi-dimensional quantum field. Like when you get that, it's like knowing that you got to be really conscious and mindful about what you're putting energy into, because everything is coexisting at the same time. There are multiple realities happening around you. There are multiple versions of yourself in different timelines. And that's what the shamans and our, medicine people knew, and the mystics of the past, they knew that. Yeah, so it's really important to understand that and to come into the presence of the moment and to consciously choose your path. And it's multiple times a day, particularly in this technocratic society when we've got so many distractions and so many opportunities. It's like consciously aligning to your true north. And if you want to expand that concept out, I've got a video up on YouTube which you can have a look at my channel there. And as always, if you want to keep in the loop or my secret hoop, check out my website, any of them, www.wisewoman.com or donaraymond.com.au, and you can join my inner circle mailing list, and that way you'll have all of these messages and wild outlandish stories straight into your inbox, so you don't miss a beat. But anyway, that's going to be it for me this evening. I will come back and read some comments, and because I saw a couple come up, but I needed to stay focused, because otherwise I would have gone on like crazy wild tangents, and I wanted to be really clear and concise with this live stream. I'm kind of losing my words at the moment. So sending you so much love and many blessings. I hope that my experience and my story serves you in some way, and that you can extract wisdom from it that can help you. And if you have had similar experiences, or perhaps different things that have worked for you, I would love it if you can comment below, because this is the path of how we help each other heal and help each other come back into our sovereign expression, is by sharing our stories and sharing our experiences and things that worked for us. It's not saying, hey, this is going to fix you. It's about saying, hey, this is what I did, and it worked for me, perhaps you might like to try it or research it or investigate it, or, you know, be a little bit curious to see what's possible for you, because we're all different. We all experience things in different ways, and sometimes you know, you don't know what you don't know. So if somebody's experienced something that could be so completely foreign to you, it might just give you a new insight or a new path to walk down. And I think that that's really beautiful, and how we can help encourage each other to come back home into here. Yeah. Hope you have a beautiful weekend. See ya.